Welcome to the second hour of Mindshifters Radio. Today is Tuesday, September 23rd, 2025. Hard to believe the month's almost gone. So what's your wake-up sheet on?
It's on, well, my grandson is just in a very bad way. And it doesn't help him that I'm so distracted with upset over it. And I hadn't done, I've done lots of wake-up sheets on him. The latest developments need a whole nother set of tools. The same wake-up sheet. So I'm halfway through dealing with fears, grief, fear that he'll never be okay, grief that he's so hurt that he has to be this way, fear that he won't even live,
Have
fear
you
for
done
my
one
daughter.
on you being afraid and that you're maybe the thought of helpless, that you can't fix him?
Yeah, all that. In fact, so many. I started a wake-up sheet and realized there are several right there in the first line.
Right.
So the wake-up sheet I use is a sort of a hybrid. I think it's on the web. It's called 5-Step Rice Wake-Up Sheet with Dr. Timothy Hayes Detailed Processing. And I've updated the details at the bottom about how you get onto the show, because it used to have the phone number, stuff like that. But it's a wonderful wake-up sheet. Hey, Michael, how are you? How are you feeling?
Thank you for doing that. I'm doing pretty well. I'm still, my legs are still clearing, but I'm in deeper and deeper appreciation of this particular healing crisis for me. And of course, over 57 or 58 years since I became conscious of the whole idea of healing crisis. I've had a lot of them, and I've had a lot of pretty dramatic ones, but this has been the most productive one I've ever had.
Really?
So I am most appreciative of it.
That's great. Well, it just amazes and impresses me that you got so down in there with that bug or whatever it was. And yet
no bugs. We've been told a story about bugs. It's a lie. It's a great way to sell drugs. But let's think about the story we've been told about bugs. I have a 1 acre field in front of me. And in that 1 acre field, I'm going to rope off 1 square foot over in this right-hand corner. And then way over there in the left-hand corner, I'm going to rope off another square foot. And I'm going to count how many bugs and buzzards and worms and creepy crawly things there are in this square foot. And I'm going to count over on that square foot the other side of the acre. Mm-hmm. Is there going to be a difference? Yeah. Probably not. Probably not. However, and I know you've heard this example before, but there are other folks on the show too that perhaps haven't.
Okay.
So when I do a count, they're probably going to be pretty much the same. However, let's imagine that it's 98.6 degrees, human normal body temperature, and I drop a dead rabbit on one corner or the other. Mm-hmm. And I leave it for 2 or 3 days at 98.6 degrees. Is there a 100% guarantee that one corner or the other is going to have an elevated count of bugs, buzzards, bacteria, viruses, worms, and creepy crawly things? Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And which corner is it going to be? It's going to be the one with the decaying flesh. Mm-hmm. Now, the decaying flesh is the bugs and buzzards are just a cleanup crew for the decay. Yeah. They do not cause the decay. Now, we've been told that they are the cause. They're not. They're feeding off of. A so-called infection is a warrant. Now, that doesn't mean there isn't a place for antibiotics. Certainly, if it became a threat to my breathing, I'd have jumped on. Actually, I used an antibiotic, but not a medical antibiotic. I used one called oregano oil, which has been proven to be more powerful than a lot of the killer antibiotics out there.
Right.
But you think about the word antibiotic, and this is just a place to have a good conversation around the whole idea of healing and disease in our culture and what we've been sold as a bill of goods. So, yes, the bugs and buzzards, if they get to an elevated level, they can become dangerous. But the danger is not in the elevated count of the bugs and the buzzards. The danger is in what's going on in the tissue. And if we're willing to clean up what's going on in the tissue, then the bugs and the buzzards, the imbalance in the presence of the bugs and the buzzards, which are always there, disappears, and the bugs and the buzzards go back into their normal routine, which is just they live their lives. We coexist with them. In fact, in some cases, without them, we'd be in trouble, like such as a case of an infection. Now, Jeannie used to work for an antibiotic manufacturer here in Bristol. It was a great job. She was a single mom on it, and it served her very well. And they were really good to her when we met and decided to go on the road. And they gave her a package, and it was wonderful. She got to spend a year at home with Ryan, first time in her life as a single mom. But you know, when they decided that they were going to take this factory and move it to a third world country where they'd make a lot more money by creating the antibiotics there, they tried to sell this piece of property. And you know what? They couldn't sell it because it manufactured antibiotics and it was too deadly. And in their annual report, they finally wrote it up and said, the only way we can sell this is to level. Now, this is a building that's a very modern, I don't know, Jeannie, how long did you work there? It was maybe 20 years or so that building was there. So it was a relatively new building. I don't know how many tens of thousands of square feet, hundreds of thousands of dollars. But to sell it, a piece of property, quote, here's what they said in the report, they had to level it to the grassy knoll because it was too deadly to sell to anybody else. So that's why I picked up on that, because it's a really important point to make. Yes, there is a place for those things when life is threatened, but to give a little kid an antibiotic, you got a running, you got a cough. No. You got a fever, let me give you aspirin. Deadly things to do. However, if you understand what's going on with the body, yeah, there's a place for it, but it's pretty rare. And so I did use oregano oil the minute that this thing started to open up to support tissue, because it also supplies some nutrients to support tissue and throwing off and dealing with what it had to deal with. And in so doing, the whole process, I know when I come out the other side, leaving away the learning aspect of it, the inner process that happened that I talked a little bit about yesterday, I got a whole other level of it this morning. It's been one of the sweetest and most wonderful healing processes that I've been through.
What was that you got this morning?
Well, unless somebody has a thought for us. Any questions, anything we need to deal with, anything going on for anybody you need support with before we step into that? And if not, then let me step into another aspect of what a healing crisis looks like. Give me just a second here, because I did quite a bit of writing this morning. So we've talked a lot over the years about Rakhma as this filter or this gateway in the frontal lobes of the brain that keeps the mind on track with love, the intentions on track with love, and is a gateway for love, human life, to enter human physiology. So what I got this morning was a whole refinement on Rakhma. And you know, one of the things you've heard me talk about a lot over the years is what Yeshua taught is not theology, it's not religion, it's physiology. And what I got was that the whole physiological aspect of this, and how I could not achieve this state in the state my cranium was in. I couldn't do it. You know, this whole healing crisis started, Wednesday night, Thursday night, whatever it was, Wednesday night, where I couldn't touch the sutures in my head, where normally every night before I go to sleep, I do some work. because I'm constantly working on getting my whole cranial structure, which has had some injuries over the years, back to its full and proper range of motion and structure. So what I was shown this morning as I was breathing was that Rakhma, it more than the filter gateway thing, it's physiological. And it's an interface that when we're in alignment with, we talk about connection, but when we're in alignment with it, in that aligned state, there's an input that otherwise is not available. And that Rakhma is the interface between physiology and the realm of what we would call the divine, the realm of love, the creator's mind. And so what I was shown, I actually, just before I woke up this morning and did my breathing, my still point practice, I had a dream. And in the dream, Jeannie was doing something, and I don't know what it was. I don't remember. It wasn't particularly relevant, but I pulled away from it, whatever it was. And when I woke up and went into breathing this morning, what I got was that pulling away. I was being shown that pulling away, contraction, restriction, disconnecting the interface is Satan. Remember, Satan in Aramaic, the resistor, one who misleads. It's physiological. And when we go into a contracted state, what does one do when they go into hostility or fear? They go into physiological contraction. I mean, you look at the extreme of it. You haven't done that. You are straight and you are tall at your young age. But you look at a lot of people that have been around the block as long as you have, and they, without a walker, look like they're walking with a walker because they've so contracted and shut down Rakhma, the interface, that, I mean, literally their whole physiology has become distorted. So any sort of fear or hostility was just so perfect to have had that dream. And it was like, not a big thing. It was just like, I just pulled away, physically just pulled away. But then when I went into breathing, it's like, yeah, and Michael, that pulling away, notice what you're, just with that little action, notice what happened to your physiology. You went into contraction. That's Satan. That's the resistor. And out of that state, when we're cut off, when the interface to the divine is gone, Rakhma, the first law to living a human life, we're cut off, and the only thing we have to work with for building our perception, our worldview, our understanding, our creative process, the only thing we can reflect through and express through is whatever's stored from the past in carbon-based memory. And that and you've heard me say many times, when you're breathing, if you remember doing still point, it's like one of the things that I've done over the years since I first discovered still point back 4.5 or so decades ago in Atlanta is recognizing the still point. And another piece that I got this morning is it's a still point is when the interface is plugged in fully, there is no resistance left, and full-blown restructuring happens because we have access to inspiration. We have access to the data of actuality that totally restructures our physiology. And that's what's happening in still point. And that's why in still point, people can go through all kinds of quote unquote physical tremors, traumas, all kinds of stuff happens because it's the open resistance-free superconductor state. And when the pulses come in, and it doesn't matter when the feet, if you remember the energy field work and the Y intensive, when we taught that, we said, now watch for the pulses and watch how they come in. Notice one stronger than the other. Watch when you stimulate it, how the other pulse steps up. And those pulses come from or a result. Now we're not looking at like blood pulses from the heart. That's different than what we're talking about. But when the interface connects and it supplies the energies we've been disconnected from our source, or in the early worksheets, one of the key lines was, what was my mistake? I made this more important than staying connected to my source. So when I get back to that connected state, those pulses are literally the energy coming in through the interface and doing restoration in whatever part of the body needs restoration. Doesn't matter what the restoration is. And those pulses bring with it the information and the insight. That's why many people come back from a still point session with, I had this major trauma. Boy, I couldn't help. I couldn't stop crying over that before I breathed about it. And I look and I go, well, what's that? Well, it was no big deal. What was that all about? It was all about what was held in carbon-based memory from the past that wasn't allowed to process out. And so, our mothers taught us this when we were really small children. What did they say? Stand up straight. Get your posture right. Why? Because you've got to physically orient yourself in order to stay connected. And if you listen, when you allow that to happen, if you listen to the pulses, if you watch, there might be, let's say, if something traumatic is stored in a part of the body, you think about the little old man or the little old lady that's hunched over like a walking cane and walking with a cane. For that person to straighten back up again would probably take years of work, because every muscle, every contraction, every resistance, every pulling away and disconnection from source has locked into tissue another trauma, another pain. So what I got on another level is that still point is a moment of connectedness, and it provides literally with connecting with the interface. The visual that I got was that when we're connected through this interface that's in the head, literally, it comes as part in the shape of the antenna as part of its connectedness. The interface, when we're connected to it, it's like security, wholeness, safety. And the visual that came with it is, we've all seen the picture of the guy floating out in space in the trauma movie, and he's connected to his source, to the ship, and all of a sudden something cuts the line and he's free floating off in space. He's gone. That's the effect of letting go of our connection to source. And the still point is like retethering to source, reconnecting. And you look at, it gives another meaning to that word religion, which means to bind to. It literally takes us back to that connected space. So for me this morning, a lot of things came together, and recognizing that when we allow that connectedness to happen, that's when we could go into that high-speed processing of still point. And then the multi-level generational database that for most people has been disconnected from source since they first held their breath and went into trauma and started to live in blame. Now taking full breaths, that breath literally is the connection to, the tether to the mothership. And that the whole body of work is about restoring that interface, which is literally in the skull. So that was the start of it. Did that bring any thoughts up for anybody? I mean, that's just, we're just touching the surface of it at this point, but any thoughts?
Michael, you said you started writing it down. How much of this have you caught onto paper? Can you nab it before it escapes? Or have you got it?
I'm following what I wrote this morning as we're talking.
Oh, wow.
I'm giving you the product of my notes.
What are you going to do? Are you going to submit it to AI right away and have them do something with it? Or
it is probably going to be part of the new book, Healing War, The End of Suffering.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it'll probably go in there.
Well, because I couldn't follow all of what you said, and maybe others could, but I would love to read it. But, I know you probably don't feel as if it's send outable yet. Can we have
It is a
previews?
process of braining. It is a process of building brain cells, no question.
Yeah, yeah. Well, as soon as you're ready to release it, I'm a customer.
Anyone else have any thoughts that resonate anything for anybody before I move on to the next piece of the puzzle? So the next piece that I got in this morning's still point time was that, we've been given many gifts to take us back to that connected space. And it's been interesting that some of those gifts, we talked about this one day last week, some of those gifts have been labeled evil, or, the one big bugaboo in the culture, sex is dirty, save it for the one you love. But in fact, physical intimacy, if it's held sacred, was a gift that was given to us to reconnect literally our brain to God. Literally, the whole structure is connected. And that profane intimacy comes from such a space of contraction and disconnection that that sexuality then just adds to the catalog of pained, traumatized energy, and that's what has that misuse has turned it into, what the culture considers to be one of the worst sins there is. A deep disconnection in that case. But physical intimacy, where the space is one of honoring your partner, it literally is another opportunity to link to and bring in that sacred energy, especially if one is disconnected in the interface, if they're untethered. Unfortunately, people get lost in the physical sensation of sexuality that's designed to draw us into reconnection. Like, everybody's doing it. Why? Because it's such a strong drive. But it's such a strong drive because underlying it is it's a way of reconnecting if we've disconnected. Without the the idea behind it of connectedness, if it just becomes a physical act without the idea of connectedness and honoring, then it just drives an addiction, because the real, realignment connection piece is missing. People driven to get their sneeze in the loins are so focused there that the real thing happening in the interface, which is in the brain, is missed. And that's the insanity that has led our world to such disgusting things as sex slaves and trafficking and children and such. And my offering is, we're designed to consciously enter the kingdom, the community of love, heaven in the Aramaic, mistranslation from the Aramaic, it's community, 2 by 2. Now, unfortunately, because this aspect of connectedness and honoring is missing in our culture, we live in a culture that, especially with the permission given in the public world today, you can puke on anybody that you want. What happens to people when there is a sexual attraction between them is that it very quickly wears off, or appears to. It's not worn off, it's destroyed by unconscious action. And that's led to this myth, another insanity, this myth of the need for many partners. Because we hook, what happens that causes that attraction to wear off is we hook our, and this, if we go back to the Healing Through Relationships workshop, that, like, I got a whole review this morning of the Healing Through Relationships workshop, because we hook our brain's perceptual apparatus to some form of fear or hostility and link it to our brain's image of that other person, then just their presence resonates this contraction, this resistance, this Satan in us, and we disconnect. And when we disconnect, we're in pain. And it's such a deep contraction that if it breaks what little connection we have through the interface that we're designed to stay connected to source with, then of course what does everybody do? When somebody resonates that in them, and they live in the blame world, they live in denial, dissociation, projection. You made me mad. Look what you did. You hurt me. You made me upset. And anyone who resonates what we've linked to our private personal pet peeves, Satan, and then automatically through resonance, we contract ourselves, disconnect. We literally break our physiological connection with the interface, and we disconnect from the creator. And that becomes the blame game. Look what you did to me. And if we're in denial and dissociation, that contraction, which is so painful, not just because it cuts blood flow, and, if you've just got a 5% lack of blood flow to a cell, that cell's in excruciating pain. When people go into contraction, one of the things they do is they cut blood circulation, they cut breathing, they cut themselves off fully from their source, and they disconnect from this interface. And if we're in total denial and dissociation, fear and hostility, when somebody shows up that resonates or activates that, the automatic result when we're in dissociation from what's in our own physiology is that contraction and disconnection. And then our mind shows us, look, they did it to us. Well, no longer attracted to them, no longer attracted to them, no longer attracted to them, getting out of their space. Loved you yesterday, but hate you today. Why? It's because of what we've hooked up to our brain's image of our partner. That's one of the reasons why in our Healing Through Relationships workshop, we emphasize, one, instantly forgiving if your partner brings anything up in you. And then when that happens and you look at the last step of the worksheet, once you've done the forgiveness process, what do? You set a new goal. And this is especially important in relationships, that if there's some sort of hostility or fear that's resonated in you in the context of a relationship, rather than walking away in a huff and going, yeah, look what they did to me, and holding your breath and going out and, hammering a nail or something, or cleaning the house or whatever, stop, forgive, then consciously, purposely think, speak, write from a connected space of cherishing them, something you admire and appreciate about them. And then, as at the end of each worksheet, set a conscious goal, an action you're willing to do toward them that's based in love. And that means that you've owned and forgiven something that probably for 1,000 generations of your bloodline, what has happened is that's been dissociated from and blamed on partners.
Mm.
So when that happens, every apparent conflict becomes the key to the next level of connectedness. Because when I say I'm in conflict, what I mean is there's something in my mind, there's something in my physiology that's resonating that doesn't belong in me, and it's breaking my interface, and it's shutting down my blood flow, and I need to heal. What have we been taught to do? Again, by the age of 4, every one of us, you and me and everybody we know. I don't know anybody who doesn't fit in this category or in this club. We were trained to be, by the age of 4, card-carrying members of the one world universal religion of blame, suffering, sadness, guilt, fear, and pain. And until we're willing to own our suffering, guilt, sadness, fear, and pain, and forgive it, anybody that resonates it, we put it on them, and we disconnect ourselves on another level by doing it. So when you set a goal that supports and solidifies your link to that interface, because you've committed to doing behavior based in inspiration. Remember, when you're connected, when that interface is connected, what you're connected to is inspiration. And when you've got inspiration, you literally have a pathway. This is how the spiritual faculties come into your form. This is the gateway. This is Rakhma. This is the gateway through which your spiritual faculties come, your will, your imagination, your intuition. Each of those faculties comes in through this gateway. And what that does, instead of leaving you stuck with, oh, I have this database of past multi-generational, what happened to my parents and their parents and their parents and my uncles and my aunts, and what happened in the and what happened in the wars and what happened in the slaughters and what happened in the murders and what happened in the starvations and what happened. That's my database. Every one of us got that database. When we connect with the interface, all of a sudden, we've got actuality available. The inspiration, the information from all of creation flows into us. And we breathe and physiology opens. And you think about that joyful state and what happens. Notice what happens to your whole physiology. What does it want to do? It wants to open. It wants to go back to that space where you're physiologically naturally connected. So if you've got a partner that does something and it's kind of like there's a whole, I was given this conversation in my still point this morning, but it's like, they may still do that thing that you used to say, and think about how things have progressed since you started doing your work. Maybe there was a time with your partner you said, when you do that thing, it infuriates me. And of course, that's just nothing but projection. And as you did your work around that issue, you moved to, I still don't like it when you do that, but I can do it with a smile. And then when you finish with that issue, when you've cleaned up in you what resonated in you, and this tied for me into that, it was so perfect. I had this little dream of it was just a little pulling away of something Jeannie was doing, but it was enough for me to be shown as I breathed. That's literally Satan taking over the resistor, the contraction that disconnects us from what we're designed to be connected to, that gives us access to the whole universe. So you progress from that really infuriates me to I don't like it. And then you get to the point when you've really cleaned up what's in you that was resonated by that. You might even think when they do it, it's cute. And then you might say to yourself things like, oh, I remember when I used to think that was the source of my upset. And you realize it wasn't the source of your upset at all. And that's the power of applying forgiveness and allowing your physiology to move and open in the way it was designed to move and open. Because without the proper physical movement and positioning, you think about, we've all seen the movie where there's somebody who's on the phone and the phone connection's going bad. What do? They step outside and they're putting the phone up and they're moving it, pointing it toward the sky. They're looking for a connection. When you open your physiology, that's what opens the interface and the connection. Direct to the active presence of love that you're designed for. And everything that resonates contraction, you look at all the fear-based churchianity stuff that's out there, and what does it do? It leads people to total contraction, shutdown, disconnection from source, and living in the misery of their generations. If you're the early adopter who said, I'm going to deal with that, bless you, because you've chosen to take on the major part of the load that perhaps in your bloodline for hundreds of years nobody's thought about putting a finger to. You go back to Yeshua 2,000 years ago, and there was a group of people in that culture that specialized in making sure nobody ever did that. Nobody ever did what we're talking about. There was a whole group of people. Remember, Yeshua said to them, you won't touch that. You tell everybody else to carry the burden, but you won't touch it with a finger. And they load people down with hostility and fear. What we want to do is offer people the tools with which to forgive the hostility and fear that's been given to us, that's been passed down generationally, that once resonated into activity, creates a contraction that literally shuts down our interface. All of a sudden, instead of being out there with the phone outside, searching the sky for a signal, the person who would drive one into hostility and fear, what they're doing is they're forcing their hand to go underground and put it in a vault and cut it off. And that, unfortunately, is where most people are living today, in their hostility and fear-based theologies and philosophies.
Michael?
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question I've been wanting to ask you for ages.
Please.
And it's a hard question.
Okay, let's go for it. I like your hard questions.
Well, considering what you've been through, talk about an amazing download. I wonder if you would do something differently, and I'm going to ask you, because it's something you did both with Michael Bennett and my grandson, Jacob, at one point. They wrote pretty nasty emails to you or texts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you answered them in kind with very harsh words. And I don't have either one of them in front of me. And I remember. I
can send them to you. I still have a record.
You do?
Yeah.
And so it doesn't really matter, except that I didn't understand. You had a reason for doing that. And yes. I wonder how, if you remember the reason, and would you do that now?
Yes. Would I do that now?
Would you answer them in the same way you did then, with the harshness?
Okay. Well, each individual is an individual, and I would be tuning in before I said anything to anybody about what the individual response has been. And you've heard me on this show, aside from those two particular occasions, and I don't think we've ever had anybody on the show as vicious as those two were with you.
Yeah.
In all my memory of 15 years on this show, we haven't had anybody with that kind of viciousness. And so what in those two cases where there was such degradation of the source of their support and such a disconnection from any form of responsibility, I consciously, purposely chose to speak the same language as they spoke in confronting them with the truth that they were in denial of. And yes, and I'm really clear that's about playing John the Baptist, and I have cases where I have chosen to play John the Baptist. But my offering would be that neither of them would have a chance of hearing in their state of denial, dissociation, upset, internal pain, and projection, would have any chance of hearing any possible opening without a direct confrontation.
I understand that, and I totally agree with you on that, but I'm not sure I'm clear about, so you give them back what they gave you in kind, like a shock treatment in order to wake them up? Was that the idea?
No, my take would be, when you think about resonance, there has to be a resonance for there to be an interchange of energy.
Yeah.
So for me, when I and with responsibility, I think if you go back, and as I say, I have a record, I'll gladly send them if you want to review them, although they aren't very nice, so you might not want to, but whatever.
Yeah.
But with responsibility, I asked each of them to look at the realities they were engaging in. And those realities were not very nice. So
No.
the words that described them were what one might call confrontational.
Mm-hmm.
But I just flat out laid out, look, this is what you've done, and it's time for it to change. It's time for it to stop. Like, wake up. And then provided the input, I think in both cases, if I remember correctly, and it's been a while for both of them, but it provided the input that said, and there's another option. There's something else possible here. And I think in each case in particular, invited you to, or pardon me, invited them to look at what, if they could for a moment let go of their 9-bit rage and let in the support you were offering them, that everything in their lives could be different. But some people aren't willing to let go.
Yeah, I know.
Now, maybe there's someone who would have a different approach to that and be successful with it. But in both of those cases, in tuning in, that's what I feel was the most likely method of success of getting them to hear that, there's a whole other reality available here, but you're not going to hear it while you stay in that blame game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I remember you said that Jesus said, I don't have that in my store. And I was wondering if you had what you did in your store, is that part of the store that Jesus, I mean, what would Jesus have done? Would he have done the same thing?
Well, I don't know. He's been one of my teachers, so I pretty much follow him in a lot of what I do. And I
Yes.
think about one particular case where there's a group of people who are puking on someone, kind of like your situation. And he
Mm-hmm.
said, your father is you are the son of vipers.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you're vipers.
Mm-hmm.
Your father is a liar. There
Yeah.
is no truth in him. Basically,
Mm-hmm.
that's what I was saying to both of them.
Yeah.
The source of your thinking is a lie, and there's no truth in it. And you got to wake up, and you're on the road to a pretty dastardly place. So yeah, I think Yeshua would say that, but he wasn't. For me, with either of them, I wasn't pouring them on them any form of hostility or fear. I was confronting them with a decoding of what their behavior was, which to
Yeah.
me is exactly what Yeshua was doing with the vipers.
Got
He
it.
was saying,
Okay.
you guys need to look at what you're doing here. You got no idea what's going on. You're so unconscious in your trauma.
Mm.
But he had no hostility or fear being poured out of his store on them. He was just saying, this is what's going on.
Yeah.
So for me, that would be the difference.
Well, I
And
can
yes, I think
understand
there are
that.
places where that's appropriate because when the mind of man gets to a certain fever pitch, it's going to take a certain resonance to crack it. And this is, I think, one of the reasons why, for instance, in the A program, they say until somebody hits their bottom, that to me would be a similar thing. Until something cracks
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
open, they hit their bottom. Then until that happens, there's not going to be a shift.
Well, in a
To me,
way,
that falls in the same category.
you were extremely brave then, because I would have liked to say things like that to both my grandson and to Michael, but I haven't. I've gone off thinking, because I was triggered and mad. Whereas
Yeah.
you're saying you were not triggered and mad. You just were dishing out what they were dishing out to show them something.
Well, my take is, for me, in those cases, now I'd have to go back and read them over. I don't sense any dishing out from me in that situation.
Yeah.
But my take was I very bluntly languaged what they were doing and called them on it.
Yeah.
So for me, I wasn't dishing out anything. For
Okay.
me, you know, I was looking for, there needs to be a crack in your reality to let some of the presence of love in that is possible in your world. And
Right.
I'll offer you that this lady, Susan, your grandmother and your friend, has really offered that to you in spades. And I'm offering it to you too. But I'm not going to take your bullshit.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Thanks.
And it sounds like maybe there's another worksheet or two in there
Oh, I'm on it.
around
Yeah.
the fear of speaking up.
Oh,
And
well, yeah, that's true. I have no idea how to speak to Jacob, and so I'm not speaking to him at all. Tim is very gentle and non-confrontive and taking a lot of abuse, and we're just letting it happen. And so,
unfortunate. Is there any movement for him? Is he?
no, he's in, I think, severe danger of even losing his life. So I'm doing a wake-up
Really
sheet
unfortunate.
on that.
Yeah.
I see where it came from. And that's the grief part of it, is because I don't know how he could be well considering what happened to him. My childhood was a piece of cake compared to his, and I've had to battle my way through brambles for a long time, and the tools have helped. With him, to watch someone going down and be witness, and he's saying, "You're not here for me. You're not giving me anything. What I really want is this, that, and the other." And he's so sarcastic.
And that's exactly what his power person did, right? You're not giving me what I want. Here, you're not here for me. Why?
Right. So yeah, I've got this wonderful combination wake-up sheet that I'm using, which is a combination of Tim Hayes's detailed processing and your 5-step wake-up sheet. And you've got it, I think, on your website, but I made my own version, and it's very helpful. Even just
if
you'd
send me a copy of it, I'd like to see it.
Well, you may already
email
have
it to me.
I certainly will. Sure, I can attach it to a text or something.
Yeah, thank you.
We can add it to the website. We have a section on others teachers' versions of worksheets.
Well, this may be already
to an email, that would be
it may be already there.
If you attach it to an email, that'd be awesome.
Okay.
Cool. Well, any other thoughts for you, young lady?
No, it's thanks for you're like on a fast track. I hope the rest of us have the brain cells to catch up with you. Maybe they're already up there. I'm needing to read it, and I think I got the gist, but there's a lot a lot there.
Well, what it did for me, what actually the last couple of weeks in particular have done for me is it's taken, and this one about the interface, it's taken what I had words for and had a theory about, and it plugged it into my physiology.
Yeah.
And I realized on a whole other level, I mean, it's always been my motivation in working with people to put forward the immediacy and the relevance of the tools, like where we live. Like this is reality. This isn't Sunday morning churchianity. This isn't religion. This is like where we live. And for me, this last several days, and especially through this particular healing crisis, has just given me a whole different direct physical experience of it, of what I've talked about. And, I'm sure it's going to change the language. Like from now on, Rakhma is not just going to be a filter in the frontal lobes of the brain. I got it. It's a physical interface in us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting, yesterday's conversation that we had, we were talking about giving AI feedback, and I had the opportunity. I was doing some dialoguing with AI this morning, and was able to give it some feedback on the primacy of the Aramaic. And every time you go to AI and you talk about Aramaic, they say, "Oh no, it's all Greek. There's no Aramaic." And so in my conversation with AI this morning, I pointed out as they're telling me about how, it's all Greek. And I said, well, actually, that's the title of my new book. It's all Greek to me. But, but you'll notice, and I invited AI, and it said that it would. I said, as you talk about, and I described, yeah, the Greeks won the war, and who writes the war, who writes the history of the ones who won the war, and they're a story to tell. But the truth is, it's been locked in the destruction of the original teachings by destroying and getting rid of the Aramaic. And then I pointed out to AI, you'll notice that even in the book that says, oh, this was written in Greek, there's a passage of Yeshua on the cross and his final words. And it says in the Greek text, this was left in the original Aramaic. And so I said to AI, would you at least consider putting a caveat in when you say, and the Greek scholars all say it was in Greek first, would you consider putting a caveat in there that says, even though the text they're talking about says the original was in Aramaic? And AI said, that sounds like a good idea. I'll do that. So I thought that was kind of cool. It's fun.
That is cool. Is that Eli, Eli, Lama Sabachthani?
Eli, Lama Sabachthani. Yeah.
Okay.
And the Greeks translated, the Greek picture of that is, here's God hanging on a tree, asking God why he's been abandoned by God.
Yeah.
Which is a pretty silly statement. My God, why hast thou forsaken me? Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani in Aramaic is, first of all, it's not said in dejection and rejection and abandonment, as though God could possibly abandon God. I mean, that's a silly idea on its face. But the greeting was not one of my God, like some distant thing. It was more like, Papa, Papa, said with enthusiasm. For this you set me aside. And being set aside in Aramaic, i.e., as for a special purpose, is a word similar to being abandoned. So the Greeks translated as he's been abandoned. But what he was saying is, my take is, much as for me this morning, I got this understanding in my physiology from direct experience. Here's Yeshua going, I haven't been so sure about this journey. Remember in the Garden of Gethsemane, not many days ago, I said, hey, can you make this pass for me? Can I get out of this?
Yeah.
And so here with enthusiasm and excitement, he goes, oh, Papa, Papa, I got it. For this, you set me aside. For this, you preserved me, reserved me. Got it. All is cool.
So amazing. Well, I always thought it was reasonable that Jesus would feel abandoned on the cross because he was both man and God, and maybe the man in that extreme physical and mental situation might have been more human than God. But you're saying right then, when it was at its very worst, he could come through as
his interface was still connected.
So
he
amazing.
had so linked in the Garden of Gethsemane. Remember, we're told, let's draw a parallel with our conversation today. I talked about this is one of the sweetest, most meaningful healing crises I've ever had. And, I didn't sweat blood, but I got rid of a couple of pounds of mucus through my lungs and a lot of strain and stress in my throat. Yeshua in the Garden of Gethsemane, and they're the signs of a healing crisis. That's what healing looks like. If you're going to revert, if something toxic has gone into the system, on the way out, it's going to look the same as it did on the way in, physically, mentally, and emotionally. So let's think about Yeshua. He's in the Garden of Gethsemane. If I were standing back as a naturopathic physician with my naturopathic brain cell hat on, watching him and knowing he was connected to love, and he demonstrated how connected to love he was by the fact that he came out and faced the archenemy and healed him instead of beat the hell out of him. So clearly he was in a high connected state. But what's he doing? He literally, they tell us, sweat blood. Now, with my naturopathic brain cells on, what I'd look at that and say is, knowing that he stayed that connected to love, that he's in that empowered a state, this is a healing process he's going through. Literally, his pores have opened up and he's detoxified on such a level that he can step out of the garden, meet the high priest servant and Peter, who's got a sword in his hand and has just whacked the high priest servant's ear, and cut it off. He turns to Peter. He says, Peter, get thee behind me, Satan. And then he explains what he means by Satan. He says, for you think in the mind of man rather than the plan of God. You're stuck in carbon-based memory. You don't have your interface open. You don't know what the hell you're doing. You're trying to block something that I'm here to do.
Right.
And then the arch enemy, who's going to have him put into that mercilessly slaughtered place, he acts as a human being. He reaches forward and he heals him. He does. He demonstrates what a human being would do, what love would do. Because through all of it, he hasn't given up his connection, his interface with his source. And then, still not sure about it. Like, remember, it's not very many hours earlier, just in a matter of, this is a span of just a few days. He goes in the garden, he says, Dad, can you take this away? I'm not sure I'm ready for this. I'm not sure I want to do this. And then, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. Got it.
Yeah, so amazing. God, that's great, Michael.
And if we have the brain cells to see that, wow, what a demonstration. What an inspiration. What a thing to open us to keeping our interface connected and literally following that example. Now, I've had people who've heard me offer that interpretation of what happened there with the high priest servant and said, Michael, have you noticed that him doing that got him dead? And my retort has always been to people who give me that line, and it's been more than one, my offering is, yes, I noticed that. Did you notice they couldn't keep him dead? That's what he came to demonstrate. The Greeks took it out as, see now, offer your suffering to God, because suffering is a pathway to God. We can keep your interface closed down. We can keep you in resistance and shut down and contraction, so you are never connected to source, and you'll always be the source of our wealth and power. So just stay in that suffering and dedicate it. Rather than, am I willing to let go of all suffering? Am I willing to actually stay fully connected to the active presence of love and not give up my human life? If I don't give up my human life and they kill my human form, how many days will it take to rebuild that temple? He said 3. Now, everybody, when he talked about that, thought he was talking about the temple in Jerusalem. No, he was talking about this temple. He said, yeah, they can do as much damage as he needs to. Give me 3 days, I'll repair it. Because he wasn't lost in his own body's death. And he wasn't attached to his suffering. And what churchianity has made a rallying cry, offer your suffering, he dissolved it, let it go, and showed the power of actually living as a true human being, living as the conscious active presence of love. So breathing with you and keeping your interface connected, holding a space for you to have the best year yet of your eternal life. Thanks for being here. Blessings. Bye-bye.